Hello, everyone, and welcome to COP325, operating your fleet of resources at scale, and it is easier than you think. My name is Oren. Nice to meet you all. I'm part of the Intelligent Operations Group at AWS. We build software products, services, tools, and our goal in life is to build those products, services, and tools that make operations fun. And presenting with me today is...
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Weber. I'm a Senior Specialist Solutions Architect, taking those same services that Oren is creating and helping you adopt them in your environment. So to give an idea of the agenda for today, first we are going to just talk about the journey to solid operations, some of the things that you need to keep in mind along the way, maybe a few pitfalls that some people have run into, and how we can make it better. Following that, we're going to be talking about an example, sample customer, in this case, Benelux, which you'll learn about more. Then we're going to be talking about how you can start making some of those operational whoopsies or missteps, make it better so that you improve your overall operations day to day. And then finally, we will be wrapping up with some key takeaways. So, this is the end of, or towards the end of reInvent. We want to just start with a no judgment zone. Maybe if we could just get a couple show of hands when we go through some of these. Please don't worry, we won't report back, who raised their hands. We're not keeping track. But who here has, used multiple different systems to maybe patch their managed nodes? All right, so maybe dependent on, start looking at them. So figuring out, where those resources reside, maybe they're on-prem, maybe they're in AWS, maybe they're even other cloud, having to adopt between these different tools can lead to more operational overhead. Who here is not even using tooling? They're actually manually patching. Oh, okay, all right. All right, who here is still connecting to managed nodes, whether you're troubleshooting or just in day-to-day operational tasks? Okay, there's a lot of you. Doesn't necessarily have to be, a judgment. There certainly are valid use cases for that if we're not able to go to full immutable. Who here does not have a node inventory, maybe a little bit uncertain of where those nodes are actually residing? Oh, we have a good footprint. All right, everyone knows every single instance that gets launched. Got it. And then finally, who here is manually tracking some software licensing? Don't want to get surprised with audits that come around, maybe put in place some automation to gather that information for you. I know several customers that go through some arduous processes when they need to figure out where those licenses are actually utilized. So, Oren, how can we start, working towards a solid operational path?
Thanks, Eric. So like you said, this is the no judgment zone. And the reason it's the no judgment zone, or the reason you can believe us that it's the no judgment zone, is because we have made every single one of those mistakes. All right? The road to operations or perfect operations never actually ends, but we've done all of this. And we have learned our lesson. And part of the fun of learning from other people's lessons or war stories is that hopefully you don't have to go repeat it. But we do sometimes RDP or SSH into a box, even though really we shouldn't have to. We have sometimes lost track of licenses, et cetera, and we have learned from a lot of that. And that is also the basis of a lot of the services that we build and that we put together is built on top of those learnings, those oopsies, as the slide would have you believe. So I'm going to grab the clicker, and I'm going to introduce you all to Benelux. Benelux is a hypothetical customer. Don't worry, we're not here to shame or name and shame anyone except for maybe me personally. And it is a banana-themed lighting company. That's why we have bananas and lighting. We are a hybrid company, so we're in the cloud as well as on-prem. Not only are we on-prem, we actually have some of our boxes running right here. So we're going to try and make this as real as possible. And to go detail the architecture, sorry, I took this too early. I apologize. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Benelux and how we have evolved over time. We started just with some servers in an on-prem environment. We had a little bit of footprint, as Oren brought back some of our VMs over here. And as we continued to expand the business, we then put some more VMs in our on-prem environment. Beyond that, we realized that we need to start expanding into the cloud to have better availability for our end customers. So we started spinning up some EC2 instances in just a single account, just a single region. And it wasn't too bad as far as having to manage all of these different nodes across these two different environments. But as the business continued to grow, that meant more servers on-prem, that meant more regions that we were spinning up to get connectivity or availability closer to our end customers, started expanding a little bit more. But that led to, again, a little bit more operation overhead. Again, not too bad, 3 different regions, on-prem, single AWS account. But then we started adopting some more products. We had more applications that we were building. And that meant we needed to start expanding across several different accounts, several different regions. We now have a much larger estate that we are working in. We have hundreds of AWS accounts. Having that information about where the inventory is of these managed resources can be a little bit more challenging now, as well as being able to kick off remote operations against all of these resources. So it's a little bit of heartburn now when we have to think about those operations, and we're going to learn a little bit more later on what we can do to make things better. So Oren, can you tell us a little bit more about some of those stories of the expansion?
Yeah, so you probably all thought I was talking hypothetically when I said me, but let me introduce you to Mr. Stick Figure. That is me, Oren. Playing the role here of name and shame, DevOps engineer, systems engineer, SRE, or just a dev that operates their own stuff like I was back then. When we started with Vanilux, I used to write my code, I used to SSH into different machines and deploy the code individually into each server, because we only had a very small number of servers. We thought we were pretty hot stuff, to be honest. We would package it up and publish it to like a custom Yum repo, and then we would go onto the machine, and we had this like written up document that said, how to make sure the repo was looking at the latest package. We thought we were so cool, and life was good. Unfortunately, though, over time, life wasn't so good. So over time, our hosts grew. The number of hosts grew. And the amount of time it would take me to SSH into every single host and go deploy it, even with fancy scripts to go, do it in parallel, et cetera, because every now and then there are some mistakes, and there's some problems. We grew so much that we decided, we're going to split up functions. We're going to have a dev team and a DevOps team. And the DevOps team, they're going to do exactly what their name says. They're going to manually SSH into the machines, but they're going to do it in parallel because there's lots of them and only one of me. So that's great, right? Ratios work really well. And as our machines grew, as our infrastructure grew, we grew our DevOps team, right? Variable headcount funding, right? There's some magical formula somewhere that says, okay, if we've got 100 servers, you need 10 people, 200 servers, 20 people, etc. Fortunately, over time, that doesn't scale either because people don't scale, and also, you can only hire so many people. So our DevOps team came to us and said, hey, you hired a bunch of development engineers, developers, DevOps people who know what they're doing, and all we're doing is sitting around doing manual work. Let's actually get this done properly. Let's do CI/CD. Now, at this point, I thought, we're done. This is amazing. Oh my goodness. I build my code, I stick it into a pipeline, it gets tested, automatic testing, and then it gets shoved down onto all the different boxes automatically, and if something fails, it rolls back. That's amazing. And at that point, we thought we were done. We have a DevOps folks focusing on that kind of development DevOps infrastructure. We have our dev people building. But then comes the ops side of things. Fine, now I can get things onto the box in a scalable way, but I still have production. And production keeps growing. And as Eric said, it grows not just into kind of hybrid, not just into your on-prem or our own little data centers, it grows into the cloud. And suddenly I have all these reasons why I need to touch the production hosts, right? I need to do some patching, or I need to do some debugging of failures, because, look, my code never has bugs. But other people's code has bugs, and we've got to go figure out what's going on. No, okay, all the bugs are mine, I promise. But you've got to go in and you've got to check it, you've got to go debug. You've got to debug the CI/CD failures, you've got to go debug the code failures, and you've got to monitor your services so that at scale you know what's going on, which means pulling logs and other bits and pieces. And suddenly all these reasons to go hit up your production servers started stacking up. I tried to draw them all out. My drawing skills are clearly superior, but at this point I failed. It just became spaghetti. Enumerating the number of reasons why I needed to go to prod just became too much. And the solution that we found ourselves in was, let's take advantage of the building blocks that AWS actually provides so that we can get rid of the vast majority of those reasons why I need to ever go to prod. And that's what we're going to be diving into today. So if you look at the Vanilux building blocks, that we're actually going to be diving into a bunch of them. There are 4 kind of primary ones. I'm sure you've all seen them before, We're going to dive into some new features that some of these services have launched very recently. But at a core level, we have CloudWatch that provides us with logs, the metrics, your alarms, your dashboards. We have Systems Manager, which provides you with your node management at scale. And the beauty of Systems Manager is it doesn't care where your nodes are. It doesn't care if it's an EC2 instance or if it's literally one of these boxes sitting up here on stage. You have AWS config for your compliance. And of course, you have CloudTrail, which, by the way, is the #1 overlooked ops tool, in my opinion. When I speak to people about CloudTrail, very often they talk to me about, oh, that's auditing. I want to know who did what, when they did when, and I want to be able to say, it's that person, I'm going to go blame them. But that's for auditing. But you can also do exactly the same thing without the blame. We don't play blame games here. But without the blame, you can do the same thing for operations. Something goes bad, one of the first places I look is CloudTrail. Did something change around then? Sure, after that I might go look at code build. After that I might go look at some Lambda or some CloudFormation, etc. But that will give me an amazing starting point that we often ignore. And we'll see some of that integrated into CloudWatch a bit later on. Now, even so, even with this absolutely incredible setup, we still have a bit of eyes on glass. We're not perfect. Operations is a journey. We're constantly improving. So as part of our operations, we have a bit of a traffic light system. And as you can imagine, the traffic light follows the kind of the standard colors. You have green that is healthy. So right now, as our pineapple shows, we are completely healthy. Now, I know it's a demo, so I don't want to jinx anything, but my point is that hopefully it will stay green for the whole demo so that nothing goes wrong. So, but if something does go wrong, please feel free to call out and let me know so that we can take care of it, because we have live customers running behind it. We do have yellow, which says there's a service issue. Service is still up, service is still around, service is still running, but something's wrong. And then we have server offline. I don't think I need to say more than that. We're on the ground. Customers are not able to get to their lights. So let's talk a little bit about optimizing operations at scale. So when we talk about optimizing operations at scale, and this is part of the journey that we took, and when I say we, in this case, this is both AWS, this is Amazon, and this is Benelux at a much smaller scale. There are two really big inputs that we look at, and I'm generalizing because a lot of sub-inputs flow into these. We have our data, and we have our intelligence. Now, data here is huge. If you look at all the data sources that AWS provides you, just by default, without you doing anything, you have a huge amount of logs for every single one of your resources. You have a huge amount of metrics. You have CloudTrail logs. You have the CloudWatch logs. You have config if you've turned it on. There's a huge amount of data. And so you combine that with some intelligence to understand what is the data that you actually want. Now, intelligence, by the way, in this case, doesn't just necessarily mean the hype right now, right? Gen AI or ML specifically. We are also intelligent. And sometimes just having a couple of intelligent queries just ready to go for when things are critical is going to be useful. But really, at the end of the day, you don't want to worry about any of those. You don't want to mess with either data or intelligence. That's a setup step. What you want is automation. That's the ideal end state. That's your infrastructure as code. That's your actual just automation, right? It's actual code that you run or codified in a runbook. When you have someone waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go take care of that server fire, you don't really want them following manual steps in a runbook in a wiki somewhere. What you want them is to be able to go run an automation document, for example, right? That's one of our services. You want them to go run an automation runbook, and you want to have it done automatically for them, maybe with a few minimal inputs, but some nice guardrails in there as well. So the problem with automation, though, and this is where I'm coming here to sell something to you, is the problem with automation is that we never know when to start automating. Because at the beginning, we only have the two little devices sitting here. And I'm not automating that. I can do it all with the keyboard that's here hidden under the table, right? The cost to automate it is very, very low, but the return on investment is also very low. Then as you scale, those scripts still kind of scale along with it. It's a little bit more annoying, but it scales. And then as you continue to grow, okay, fine, now instead of minutes, it takes a few hours, but then you're looking at it, you're like, well, to automate, that's going to take me a couple of days, so I don't know if I can justify it. Now, as devs or engineers, regardless of what type, we want to automate everything, right? I have absolutely guaranteed spent more time automating some tasks than it would have taken me to do it manually, because I just could not be bothered with all the clicking. And that's kind of okay, because at some point, the clicking grows to a certain point where the cost to automate starts growing, and you do not scale with it because you can only click so fast. And so at some point, you have to find the balance. And for each person, each individual, each system, each service, each company, there is a balance somewhere of doing it too early and doing it too late. I work a ton with startups, and one of the really cool things that I try to impress on startups is please automate the repetitive tasks as soon as possible because it will pay off. And it does. It really does. Because at some point you get to this and you're stuck. Like you're talking now about months of work to automate, to try to test this at scale, etc. It doesn't work. It's too late. Because you want to avoid this. I'm looping back. You want to avoid this. And the way to avoid this is to have your automation. You have your automation to do your patching. You have your automation to pull your logs. You have your automation to run arbitrary safe commands without having to even do SSH. Because then you know that you don't have to worry about someone SSHing in and getting root or getting access to the IAM role on an EC2 instance. They have a limited set of commands that they can run. It runs through the automation, and you're there. Automation at the end of the day is the key to getting rid of that spaghetti. And it is for everyone. Again, I hear it so often, like, oh, we're too small to automate. And the interesting thing is it doesn't often come from the engineers. It often comes from leadership because they don't want to spend the time doing it. So our role as engineers is convincing the people above us, and I will come talk to anyone about this. I'm very passionate about this bit. But our role as engineers is to automate, and our role as leaders is to make sure that our people have enough time to go automate because it is in our interest as well, regardless of what size. Because at some point, operations kicks in. At some point, compliance kicks in, and you've already got a bunch of scripts already ready to go. And it doesn't matter which bit you're trying to automate, but it will pay off in the future for everyone. Now, where do we come into play other than just having services? Over to Eric.
So as Oren was mentioning, regardless of where you may be in your journey or your size, whether you're a smaller company or a large-scale enterprise, AWS is here to meet you where you are with that scale. To give an idea of how much information these few cloud ops services that Oren was talking about earlier is really producing. So Amazon CloudWatch is observing over 11 quadrillion, or if you want to convert it to maybe something that's a little bit more understandable, 11,000 trillion. If that's a little bit more relatable, metrics observations are being recorded per month. So that's 4.2 billion observations per second. Systems Manager is managing on average over 450 million unique managed nodes each month, again, whether they're on AWS, on-prem, or other cloud. AWS Config is recording over 9 billion compliance checks each month, and AWS CloudTrail is auditing 850 billion API events per day. So again, wherever you may be in your journey towards operations and usage of AWS, our services are built to scale and meet you where you are. So let's talk about managing some of those nodes at scale. So what does this really mean? So just about 2 weeks ago, Systems Manager launched a brand new experience for managing these resources. So from this single console, you can go and enable it with just a few clicks. We're really just specifying which account we want to aggregate our data into a delegated administrator, and then which regions we actually want to collect information from. So from here, you can get visible insight immediately into how many managed instances you have, how many unmanaged EC2 instances you may have. It'll also help you diagnose and remediate the reasons why those managed nodes, or sorry, rather, why those EC2 instances are in an unmanaged state, because we want to bring them into that managed state so we can start having that automation. And we can start performing our patching on our routine schedules. We can kick off run command operations and remotely manage them. Leverage Session Manager if we need to establish that interactive connection. And there is also integration with Amazon Q. So you can go to Q, use natural language prompts to get information about your resources. Give me a list of all of my Windows 2019 instances. It'll spit it back out, be able to go and pull that information, jump over to the Systems Manager console with that context pre-baked in so you can start diving deeper. So let's actually take a look at it within the console now. So if we flip over into the AWS Management Console from here, again, we can see that immediate information about our node insights. We have a few different widgets just going to be on the front dashboard. In this case, Bandelux is running in a great environment. We have everything that is already managed by Systems Manager. Again, this is going to be a little bit of a mixture of EC2 instances, as well as a few different hybrid managed resources as well. Each of these widgets are also interactable, so you can always click on them, and then if you need to expand or drill in deeper to a particular slice, you can do that. And then finally, it's just going to be presenting some information about SSM agent versions. We recommend that you run the latest version so that we can always keep up to date with any bug fixes or future improvements that are added. And then finally is going to be just the managed node operating systems. So here you can see the operating systems that all of those managed resources are running. And if we were to take a step back into maybe a sample scenario, let's imagine that we are working on some of our, we're working on our managed environment, and we've been given direction that we need to start migrating off of end of life or close to end of life operating systems. So in our sample scenario, let's just say that we are targeting these 2016 managed instances. We want to start upgrading them to either 2019 or ideally over to 2022. So from here, I can go ahead and drill into that list of resources. This will bring me over into this Explore Node section. Again, another one of those new features that were added. And this is going to break down all of those resources across my accounts, across my regions, and spit back out the information for me so I can see where each of those instances reside across my environment. What is their IP address? I could pull other information in here as well, such as the computer host name. Again, just a lot of different information that Systems Manager is going to aggregate back into this delegated administrator account. Now, if I am working on this list of resources, I may need to then go ahead and share out that information, across my organization, work with those application owners to prepare for that migration, to 2022. I can go ahead and generate a report that is then just going to download to your local computer. But what's going on?
It looks like we actually do have a problem. I'm sorry. I know I told everyone that we're going to be super stable, etc., but unfortunately, it looks like, you remember the traffic light system? Unfortunately, we have two problems. I think one of them is the migrations. I think one of them is your problem, but I'm going to keep that down as a yellow, and I think we've got a problem with the red. We actually have some servers down, and it's probably time to go off and investigate that. So one of my first starting points when I'm going to go in here is I'm going to jump straight to CloudWatch, because that's where we got our alarms. That's where we're going to get started from. We are running this portion in, we're being very brave, we're running in US East 1. And as part of US East 1, there is a brand new launch that came out 2 days ago. So this is hot off the presses, where we have this air operations, which essentially allows us to go in and debug a bunch of applications. Now you can see here, it seems to say that everything's okay, but I can tell you for a fact it's not. So what we're going to do is we are going to go in and we're going to go create an investigation. And with investigations here, what you can do now is that you can start saying, hey, I'm going to start looking through all of my different alarms, my different metrics, and I'm going to bring them together into one place. Think of it as like a dynamic dashboard, but it's a notebook. Very similar to the notebooks that you would have seen across a bunch of different products. So the idea here is that you have a live notebook that can be shared across our organization. So everyone here at Benelux right now has access to this. Were you just interacting? And the idea here is that I can go pull in any alarm that I want. So for example, I can go in and I can go double check some of my alarms that are running right now. And I can say, for example, like, hey, let me look at the errors here. And I can say, I want to go add that into an existing investigation. And as part of that, and this little sidecar here will pop up everywhere. So for example, well, we'll see soon. It will show this little icon. Will follow you across the console. And you can add bits and pieces to your investigation from wherever you are. So I can go add that into the investigation now. I can go back and open this up in kind of full screen because I can see better. And there's the metric that I just added. Now, at a high level here, right, I have a bunch of different bits and pieces that I was just looking at even before it started, when it went yellow originally. And I've added in a bunch of different bits. But in addition to that, CloudWatch has said, hey, I found a bunch of stuff as you were looking in. Like you added a metric, so this was just added in, right? I have a metric. I've actually found some problems here from your logs that have come through live, like right now. And it's added them in immediately. Now I can say, no, I don't want them, right? So here's all the different suggestions that it's found, that Amazon Q has found. And so Amazon Q Investigations has gone and it's helping me here as I'm going through. Now I can go and add my own bits and pieces, right? So, seeing red traffic light, investigating further, looks like latent impact with residuals. Very fancy words. And then the idea here is that multiple people can be collaborating at the same time within this notebook. And this notebook is obviously refreshing immediately. And you can sync that back into, for example, like your Slack or your Microsoft Teams using the AWS chatbot so that you can interact with this investigation from Slack as well. So for example, if you have an operations channel, you would hook that up into here. And so as soon as, if people are monitoring the operations channel, you could even be looking at an alarm that is completely green. And you could say, something looks a little odd to me. So I'm going to go start an investigation, because the investigation is not an incident yet. It's not, we're red. So I shouldn't really be talking. I should be trying to fix it. But we'll pause on this for a second. But the idea here is that you can go start an investigation whenever you see something that looks a little bit off. And you have a hunch. And sometimes you want a bit of backup. So you start pulling together all the different logs that are relevant, pull them into here. You pull all the different metrics together and you pull them into here. And while you're doing that, the AI model in the background is correlating all of these, and it's finding extra things that also look like, okay, maybe they're not quite triggering an alarm yet, but together there is impact, which is what we're seeing here, which is exactly what's happening here, right? I have a bunch of alarms that look like they're okay, but I can clearly see that something happened, and it looks like it's recovered, but it hasn't fully recovered. And then as part of that, as part of the analysis, we're not going to just see suggestions, right? So what you're going to see here is observations, right? These are essentially suggestions that say, hey, we found something. It looks like it might be related. And you can say, for example, like, here are all the different observations related to this specific failure that Amazon Q developer has found. And I can accept or discard some of them. So I can say, do you know what? Yeah, ECS is high, but I know that I only use ECS for my testing infrastructure, so that was probably a deployment, that was a while ago, so I don't need that in there. So that drops off, it disappears. And then the really cool thing in addition to that is that once you have enough data in there, and Q developer has gone through and tried to understand what's going on, it will start presenting you with hypotheses for what actually went wrong. And the hypotheses are very straightforward. They're written in natural language. This is one of the benefits of having a large language model. And it will tell you that actually it looks like, if you look here through ECS and the API gateway, as well as some of the DynamoDB, and if you take a look at all the different metrics, so it's explaining to you why it found this, it is actually saying, hey, I think the problem here is that you're being throttled by DynamoDB. And I want to thank everyone here for checking out Bannerlux and driving so much traffic to our website during this talk that you caused this to happen. That's really cool. But we better fix this quickly because our real customers actually need their lights back on. And so one of the cool things that you can do here when you have an hypothesis that's been suggested is that you can actually accept the hypothesis. And once you accept the hypothesis, you have a bunch of actions that we're going to suggest to you. Now, the actions are going to be a combination of different types of content that are designed to help you fix the problem. Because again, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, right? I mean, it's not really, but it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I just want this fixed. And so, for example, one of the first things it's going to suggest is like, hey, I've got a runbook for this. I have an AWS provided, AWS built, AWS coded runbook that will specifically fix this problem, which is specifically to modify your DynamoDB provision capacity. But I get it. You run on all of our services, but you don't really trust our automation. Totally get it. That's very reasonable because it's running in your infrastructure versus underneath your infrastructure. So we're also going to give you a bunch of knowledge articles, which are not just random knowledge articles. This is where the runbook was coded from. We went through the knowledge articles. We worked with our support folks. We worked with customers, and we coded up by hand with developers automated alternatives to these knowledge-based articles. But we get it. First couple of times, you're probably going to want to try out the knowledge-based article. And here is where it gets really cool. We're also going to find runbooks that are owned by you that are relevant. So we happen to have a runbook called Save the Bannerlux Day. And it is used to kick our service. When we have a problem like this, where it is a latent kind of impact, but it does recover, but the service doesn't recover fully, we have a runbook that just runs. And because of the keyword search that's happening through here, we're not only suggesting the AWS default kind of suggestions, we're not only suggesting the manual default suggestions, we're also searching through your runbooks, and these are runbooks that you can find within Systems Manager Automation. So Systems Manager Automation is a huge, at-scale automation platform. It's low code. You can do low code. We are very flexible with how you write it and how you run it. And as long as you have good descriptions in there, we will match those up to real incidents. And then you can run it directly from here. So you can view the actual runbook, you can see the description, you can link out to see this is the full kind of automation experience here. So we have a bunch of more information. This is what it does. If you don't remember at 2 o'clock in the morning and you particularly want to go look at some graphs, well, there you go. There's an execution graph for you, just to remind yourself what it does. And you can fill in the various parameters, and you can execute it straight from here. Now, this is going to take a couple of minutes to run, obviously, because we're at scale. These things don't fix themselves within seconds. They fix themselves within minutes. But while this is running and getting fixed, I'm going to put you on the spot because that yellow thing is bugging me, and I'm sure it's to do with what you were just playing with.
Well, while you were just working on that, Oren, we actually got some great news. Our business expanded even further, which meant that we added some more nodes to our environment. But unfortunately, it looks like they're not in the best state. They're not ready to be managed by Systems Manager. They're not ready to be patched or gather information about that operating system. So now when I go back to this Review Node Insights page, on the top left, I can see that I have 153 instances that are unmanaged. So what am I going to do about that? Here, I can just go ahead and hit Diagnose. This is going to bring me over the Diagnose and Remediate section. And this is going to help figure out why those EC2 are not registered with Systems Manager and bring them into play. So here, there are going to be 2 different types of issues that this feature can help with. So first is just going to be the general deployment of this new Systems Manager experience. And then secondarily is going to be focusing on those EC2 and why they are not registered. Now, if I were to kick this one off now, I can kick off a new diagnosis. But as you can see, I did run one a little bit earlier in today. So from here, I can then go ahead and diagnose the report from this or download the diagnose report. This is going to give me a similar CSV file of that previous one that we were taking a look at, showing me which accounts and regions these EC2 instances live in and some basic information about those. But beyond just providing a report on which instances are not checking in, similar to what Oren was just showing, this can help me remediate the issue as well. Now, in this scenario, it looks like all 153 of those instances are missing VPC endpoints, whether that means that they just don't have a route to the public internet, maybe they have, they are just missing those VPC endpoints, they don't have a proxy, is what I should have said. But in this case, if we need to go ahead and deploy out those VPC endpoints, this same runbook is going to do that for me. So here, I just have to provide, or I can take a look at the steps that are going to be performed. Again, similar to what Oren was just mentioning. If I want to modify my targets, I don't have to deploy this out across all of those accounts which have those unmanaged EC2. I could always filter down, maybe start with just a single account, maybe just flip into a single region that I want to provision these VPC endpoints into. And when I'm ready, I can then just go ahead and hit execute. So this is going to start initiating an automation workflow against each of those accounts, each of those regions where those unmanaged instances reside. And in this case, it's going to go ahead and evaluate those VPCs that those EC2s are spun into. So it's going to provision out a new VPC endpoint for Systems Manager so that we can hopefully reestablish that connectivity with this managed instance. Now, again, to take a look at the scale, if we go over to automation here, we can see the workflow starting up. So we have our orchestrate of those managed or unmanaged EC2 actions. And if we drill into this first one here, we can see that it's already going across my accounts. It's going region by region, and it's going to start spinning up those VPC endpoints and hopefully resolve the managed instance status for these instances. So eventually, this would go back into fully green, but we'll go ahead and take a look at the settings for one more feature that I wanted to highlight. Now, this diagnose and remediate functionality, I could have kicked it off manually, but we should probably go ahead and schedule a recurring diagnosis instead. We don't just want a one-time idea of which instances are unmanaged. We want to keep an eye on this routinely. So we can either schedule this to be executed every single day or once a week. And from here, we can then just specify our start time as well. When we're ready, we can go ahead and hit save, and this is going to continually check for any of those unmanaged EC2 instances and help give me a reason why they are in an unmanaged state. So again, we can always go back and reflect on those previous executions that were performed, previous diagnoses, see if there were similar issues or differing issues, and hopefully bring our infrastructure into a better state so that we don't have those instances in an unmanaged state going forward.
Firstly, thank you for doing that, Eric, because everything's gone green. I just realized you folks can't see what I'm talking about with the green. There are lights on the other side of the stage. I apologize. But thank you. I believe that everything is now flipped, that last yellow one, so thank you. That's awesome. We obviously
Looking
just
good.
managed to hit the right node. And then just before we flip back to the presentation, now that we're not red, I can go a little bit slower through two things that I just wanted to just highlight within Cloudwatch. So firstly, the first thing that I did want to highlight is the fact that this investigation will follow you along. So obviously now it's remediated, which is awesome. But if I do want to kind of dive in a little bit more into my DynamoDB tables that, that were throttling me, I can have the investigation follow me around. So I haven't closed the investigation yet. It should come up, there we go. And so at the end of the day, there's the hypothesis that I put in and there's the reasoning, but no matter which dashboard I'm in, this investigation follows me along. And that allows me then to do little actions no matter where I am without having to worry about, I already have 20 tabs open, and on average day I probably have 10 times more than that. If I can save myself one extra tab by having it pull out like a sidecar essentially, brilliant. So that then follows you around, and that's a part of that. And of course, you can always just link back here with the open full page if you want to go back to the full experience. One other little bit that I did just want to highlight. Let's go back to the full experience. There it is. So again, our scenario here is 2 a.m. But it doesn't have to be 2 a.m. It could be 2 p.m. And you're about to run an automation. You still want to know, even if it's your own automation, is this automation going to be safe? And you don't want to have to go read through that huge graph that I just showed you before, because that's essentially doing a code review every single time you're running an automation. It kind of defeats the purpose of doing the automation. So one of the things that we have here is an automatic preview of what's going to happen. So let me just zoom in on that a little bit. And it will tell you how risky it is to actually run this automation. So the core automation team worked really hard on this. And the idea here is that you can get a very quick snapshot that says, I'm going to run this automation. Oops, I thought it was going to run across one account, but it's actually going to run across my whole org, which is 10,000 accounts, plus minus, right? Oops, that's probably a mistake. Or I thought it was going to run across one region, but I really wanted it to run across everything, and I can see here exactly what it's going to run on. So it has a summary here. It will also go through and analyze the different steps you're taking here and say exactly that there are some mutating steps, i.e. writes, and non-mutating steps, i.e. reads. So read APIs that come through. So again, now that we're all green and we can talk through some of the cool features that exist, that exist kind of within CloudWatch investigations, it's just a good time to take a step back and say, hey, this is something that I should go check out, because this will significantly shorten your time to investigate any issue. And it's one of those things where it's like, you don't have to have an alarm going off to have a hunch. And normally all of our processes kick off when an alarm kicks off. And it's really cool to finally have a tool that says, I'm going to go dive into what I'm seeing right now, and I don't need to put it in Notepad or in code, VS Code or whatever, right? I actually have a place in the console. It can get analyzed. I can share it with other people. And at the end of the day, if it's not great, like hey, oh my God, the best outcome possible, right? I had a hunch, turns out everything's good. Phew, right? You just end the investigation. It's all done. All right. So again, thank you so much for joining us here today. I want to recap very quickly what we ran through. At a high level, we ran through 3 key takeaways, because at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter which services. I happen to think that these services are incredible and you should all check them out. But at the end of the day, there are also some major takeaways for how you can use AWS across all of its different services to go manage your fleet, your nodes, your resources. It doesn't matter if you're completely serverless or completely with servers or some kind of hybrid, how you can go run those at huge scale. So the first thing you want to do is you want to recognize that you have scale. And you want to go simplify that scale. You want to simplify it with things like Systems Manager, which allows you to do cross-account, cross-region management of your nodes and your fleets. You want to bring some intelligence, be it human intelligence, Gen AI intelligence, or custom intelligence, whatever is your flavor, or all 3 of them. You want to bring those into your investigations because you want to be able to shorten them. You want to bring them You want to bring resolution as fast as possible. And then you want to automate. So there's some key themes here that we've been repeating a couple of times, just in case you didn't hear them, right? You want to be automating. And I know it sounds obvious. You're all sitting there going like, are you serious? This is COP325. Of course we know we need to automate. But how many people actually have automated or have automated where you are? My team, one of my teams is actually called automation. They build that automation platform, and we have a ton of stuff automated, and even there, we're not fully automated. And it's just a reality of doing business. But making sure that we remind ourselves that we want to simplify at scale, we want to bring intelligence in, and we want to bring both of those things together with automation so that I don't have to worry about what the manual steps are every time, is what's going to help you scale to that next level.
So how can you get started with some of these experiences that we were talking about today? So we do have a few different QR codes up on the screen now if you want to go ahead and take a look. The first is going to link to some announcement blogs for some of that new Systems Manager experience. If you actually want to see a visual demo that you can click through without actually having to provision in your account, that'll be that second one. And then the third one is actually a hands-on workshop. So if you are looking to try things out, you can work with your account team and they'll spin up vended AWS accounts that are sandboxed, that are outside of your environment, and you can get the full experience, try everything out that we've talked about today. So I'll pause just for another moment. Okay. So I wish I could say, meet us over at the CloudOps kiosk, but
You've got 45 minutes, run.
Yeah, so if you can teleport there, you can talk to some of our representatives at the kiosk. But again, we just want to extend a huge thank you to everyone that took the time to attend the session today. Oren and I will be available afterwards as well if you want to continue any discussions. But again, thank you all. I hope you have a great rest of your reInvent.